Light a deep. Hello everyone, wishing you all good health and peace in life. Sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is let go of the pain that once defined them. After everything she had endured, heartbreak, betrayal, and long nights filled with silent tears, Light a Deep made a quiet, yet powerful decision to leave her past behind. No more running, no more dwelling on the scars life had etched into her soul. With a steady heart and the hand of CEO James in hers, she chose to begin again. The small wooden house James built wasn't just a shelter, it was a promise of healing, of love without conditions, of mornings filled with laughter and nights wrapped in peace. As Tu Diep stood at the doorstep of her new life, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But as the walls of her new home rise around her, what kind of life awaits inside? Will happiness finally settle into the corners of her heart? Or will new challenges test the love she's slowly learning to believe in? One thing is certain: with James by her side, she's not facing this new beginning alone. The wind brushed gently through the tall grass as sunlight poured across the open land, warming the earth and everything it touched. Standing on a quiet hill, Light a Deep looked out over the vast, green field that would soon become her new home. It was the first time in so long that she had felt something close to peace, fragile, unfamiliar, but undeniably real. Just days ago, she had still been trapped in the shadow of her past. The weight of losing her parents and the haunting memories that never left her had left Deep broken, distant, and drowning in grief. For too long, she had allowed that pain to consume her, refusing to believe there could be a way forward. But James had been there, not as a powerful CEO or a man with wealth, but as someone who simply refused to give up on her. He had waited by her bedside, holding her hand when she burned with fever, whispering words of love and hope even when she could not respond. He had wiped away her sweat, fed her warm food, and quietly fought back his fear that she might not wake up. And when she finally opened her eyes, weak but breathing, he smiled as though the world had been given back to him. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, voice cracking, "but you're here. That's all I need." Deep had apologized again and again, ashamed for having let her sorrow pull her so far away from him. But James only smiled and said, "You don't have to apologize for hurting. Just promise me you'll try to live, to be happy, to build something with me." And so she did. Now, walking beside James through the land he had quietly bought for her, Deep felt something unfamiliar swelling in her chest: hope. The property was peaceful, far from the noise of the city, but still close enough to the town that she wouldn't feel isolated. James had planned everything. There would be a small house in the center, a garden full of fruit trees, guava, pineapple, pomelo, and even a little pond for raising fish. He had thought of every detail, not as a businessman, but as a man building a future with the woman he loved. "I want you to take care of this land," he said, gently. "Grow your fruits, sell them if you want, or just enjoy them. This is your place now, our place." Deep could barely hold back her tears. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, protected, and most importantly, loved. Later that afternoon, they sat on the edge of the field, watching the workers finish pouring sand for the foundation of the house. The sun was lower now, golden and soft, and Deep turned to James, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm ready," she said. "I want to leave the past behind. I want to stop wondering why my parents left me. I want to stop thinking about pain. I want to live in the present with you." James reached for her hand. "Then let's build something beautiful together." The house would take time, and so would healing. But every brick, every seed, every quiet evening they would spend watching the stars, all of it would be part of their new story. Deep was no longer the girl who sat alone in silence, haunted by memories. She was a woman choosing to love, to trust, and to begin again. And as they walked hand in hand through the land that would soon become their home, the wind carried away the last of her sorrow, leaving only the promise of something new, a future worth fighting for. The following week, construction began. Every morning, Deep would walk out to the site with a cup of tea in her hands, watching the workers lay each brick with care. The smell of fresh cement mixed with the earthy scent of wet grass became familiar, almost comforting. James often arrived early, his sleeves rolled up, helping lift wood or reviewing plans with his team. Despite being a CEO, he never treated himself above the work. He was building a home, not just a house, and he wanted Diep to see that effort in every nail, every wall, every doorway. During lunch breaks, they sat together under the shade of an old tree, sharing simple meals. Diep began to laugh again, quietly at first, but James noticed every time. That gentle smile of hers, once buried under layers of pain, now returned like sunlight after a long storm. One afternoon, after the frame of the house had begun to take shape, James took her hand and guided her to a small wooden bench he had built just for her, placed near the edge of the garden to be. "You see that spot?" he pointed. "That's where your guava tree will go. And over there, your herbs, your flowers, your morning glories." Diep nodded, imagining it already. "It's hard to believe this is real." James turned to her. "It is, and it's yours." Later that evening, as the sky turned pink and the first stars emerged, Diep lay on a mat outside, staring at the sky. She hadn't felt this peaceful since she was a child. She still had moments where her chest ached with memories, nights when she dreamt of her parents, only to wake up to silence. But those moments were no longer traps. They were just echoes, gently fading. One night, while they were finishing dinner, James pulled out a small wrapped box. Diep looked at him, surprised. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a simple silver necklace. At the center hung a tiny pendant shaped like a house. "For the home we're building," he said, softly, "and everything it will hold." Tears welled in Diep's eyes, but they were no longer tears of sorrow. She wrapped her arms around him, holding tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for this, but for not giving up on me." James kissed her forehead. "You were never lost, just waiting to come home." Days passed, then weeks. The roof was laid, the floors finished. James brought in furniture himself, while Diep chose the curtains, the bowls, the vases of fresh flowers. She planted the first guava tree, her hands in the soil, a smile on her face. When the house was finally done, they stood together at the front door, holding hands. James handed her the key. "Ready?" he asked. Diep took a breath, looked at him, and smiled. "I was born ready." They stepped inside, and it felt like the beginning of everything. A real home, a second chance, and for Diep, a future she had once believed she'd never deserve, now unfolding with every step. Outside, the sky stretched wide and golden, and inside, love finally had a place to live. The first night in the new house was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that felt sacred. Diep lay beside James, her head resting on his shoulder, listening to the sound of the wind brushing through the trees outside. The room still smelled like fresh wood and new beginnings. No longer was she waking up to the cold emptiness of hospital rooms or memories that clung to her chest like chains. Here, in this bed, wrapped in a soft blanket and in his arms, she felt safe. "I can't sleep," she whispered. James turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Why?" she hesitated. I'm afraid this will all disappear. Like I'll wake up and none of it was real." James held her hand tightly. "It's real, Diep. Every nail in this house, every wall, every word we said, they're all real. You're here. We're here. And no one can take that away." A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. For the first time, she let herself feel without hiding. "I used to think love was something that would always leave me, that everything good in my life was temporary." "And now," James asked gently. She looked into his eyes. "Now I think maybe love stayed." In the days that followed, Diep began to rediscover herself. She spent mornings watering her guava and pineapple plants, afternoons baking simple meals for James and the workers, and evenings sitting on the porch, listening to the cicadas sing under the setting sun. One afternoon, while cleaning the small pond at the back of the house, she saw a pair of dragonflies dancing above the water. They reminded her of something her mother used to say: "When do dragonflies fly together? It means love is nearby." She smiled softly, whispering into the wind, "I'm okay now, Mom. I'm okay." Later that evening, James found her standing by the pond, her reflection glowing under the moonlight. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I feel free," she admitted. They stood there in silence, two souls that had once been lost, now grounded in each other. "James," she said suddenly, turning to face him, "what if we filled this house with more than just memories?" He looked at her, unsure. "What do you mean?" "I mean, a family," she said shyly. "I want us to build something that lasts forever." James was speechless at first, eyes wide. Then, slowly, a tear traced down his cheek, not from sadness, but from something even deeper. "Joy, gratitude, love. I've wanted that too," he whispered. "I just didn't know if you were ready." "I am now," Deep said, her voice steady. "I want a future, not just for me, for us." That night, under a blanket of stars, their dreams no longer felt distant. The ghosts of the past had finally begun to fade, and in their place was something gentle, something whole, something real. For the first time in her life, Deep wasn't just surviving, she was truly living. And in the heart of a quiet countryside, in a house built by love and hope, a new chapter had already begun, one filled with laughter, light, and the quiet promise of forever. There are moments in life when everything feels heavy, when the past wraps around your heart like chains, and no matter how far you walk, it follows. Grief, pain, betrayal, abandonment. These are not just feelings, they become memories that replay again and again in your mind until you begin to believe that happiness was never meant for you. But then, something, or someone, comes along and offers you a different path. Through the story of Deep, I learned that healing is not something that happens in a single moment. It is not loud, it is quiet, slow, and sometimes painfully still, but it is possible. Deep carried her pain like a shadow. The loss of her parents and the loneliness of growing up without their love left wounds too deep to see. For a long time, she tried to hide them, tried to live as if they weren't there. But pain doesn't disappear just because we pretend it doesn't exist. It lingers, and yet, despite the darkness she lived with, someone reached out a hand. James did not fix her. He didn't have magic answers. What he did was simple. He stayed. He waited. He loved her in silence, through sleepless nights and fearful days. And sometimes, that's all a broken heart needs, not solutions, just presence. A reminder that you're not alone. The greatest lesson I've learned from their story is this: you are allowed to start again. Letting go of the past does not mean forgetting. It means choosing to stop living in it. It means deciding that your future deserves more than your pain. It means believing, even just a little, that happiness is something you can build, even from broken pieces. Deep's journey taught me that love is not loud and dramatic. It is steady. It is in the small things: a bowl of warm soup, a freshly planted tree, a gentle voice whispering, "You're safe now." And most of all, I learned that we are stronger than we think, even when our hearts feel fragile, even when we're scared, even when we feel like giving up. Because the truth is, new beginnings are often disguised as endings, and every sunrise that follows, the longest night, is proof that life still has more in store for us. If you're carrying a heavy past, I hope you find the courage to set it down. Not all at once, just enough to breathe, enough to see that there is still beauty ahead, enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, you still deserve joy. And when you do find it, hold onto it with both hands. Build something from it, like Deep, like James, like so many who dared to begin again, because there is no greater strength than choosing to love after pain.